Welcome to the Tier 1 Podcast, bringing you interviews with the brightest minds in the shooting industry. Get unique insights to help you shoot better, survive longer, and outperform your competition. Brought to you by Tier 1, the world's best shooting accessories.
Welcome to the third episode of the Tier 1 Podcast. We're racking them up now, and I hope that we can increase the speed that we put these out at so you can get through this quarantine rubbish a bit easier. Today we've got Nick Bazzone. We're very, very lucky to have Nick. He is a competitive PRS shooter in the US. He's also currently the SNCOIC, so he's which means he's one of the head guys at the US Marines Mountain Sniper School. He's currently a US Marine sniper. So he knows his way around a rifle, and he's been competitive shooting for a while as well. In this podcast, we cover what is PRS, how do you get into PRS, how do you train well for it, what are the key sort of setups and pieces of gear and also skill sets that you need to know, and what stuff can you kind of forget about and not worry about to begin with. How can you simplify the whole process and make sure that when you step up to that stage, you're ready to go. I really enjoyed this chat with Nick, actually. I think it's really informative. It's got a lot of good intel for somebody who's interested in getting into PRS or has maybe shot a few matches and just wants to improve. So that's enough chat for me. Please enjoy the interview now with Nick Bazzone.
But now I've just extended that distance because you still have the same wind calls, with the 22 at 100 yards. I mean, you still got to make a wind call.
How would you do that at 100 yards then? Would you just like throw dirt in the air and take a guess? Would you look at a flag? Would you use a kestrel? I mean, kestrel seems overkill at that sort of close range.
Is it? I mean, because you got to think, right? So, I mean, at that point, we're starting to get into, let's see here. I'm just going to look at a ballistic app and see what distance I have for a 22 at 100 yards, so we can talk, intelligently about it. Yeah. All right, so a 22 with a 50-yard zero at 100 yards with a 10-mile-an-hour wind, you're looking at 1.5 up on elevation,
right,
mils, and a right of 1.2 mils. Really?
Okay. What app do you use?
Well, I'm just using one on my phone right now. It's called Strelok, STRELOK, and it's like very beginner friendly, and I use it mainly out of laziness. As far as like it's got big buttons, easy readout. I use it to store a lot of my gun information because on the Kestrel, I can only have so many profiles and so many different ammo loadouts. Whereas, and sometimes I accidentally delete them when I'm updating my Kestrel, so I always keep backup on my phone. And I do it on Strelok too. Yeah. And it makes it easy when like a buddy borrows a gun. I'm like, oh, here's the dope chart because it spits out a dope chart for you. So.
Right. That's handy. I guess everything's done on a phone. Like it makes sense. Everyone has their phone on them all the time. Like it makes sense to just use that.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you don't have a Kestrel, it'll pull weather data from the nearest weather station for you. Right. So, I mean, it's not going to be exact, but, they have a free version. I have the pro version. I think it's like $10. I think it's worth it,
Yeah.
Especially when I want to, like, look up, like, quick ballistic charts, I just type in what I need to know on there. Like just now, I'm like, hey, for a 22 at 100 yards for a 10-mile-an-hour wind, that's a 1.2 mile a wind call, Yeah. Even at a 4-mile-an-hour, it's still a 0.5.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. What if you didn't have the chart and you had to make that wind call then? What if you didn't have the app, you didn't have the Kestrel, and you were just making a short-range wind call? How would you do it?
I mean, you could take a swag, right? Scientific wild ass guess, but there's a lot of different ways. Some people, they hold their Kestrel up into the air and they get a wind reading, and then they plug that into their app, which is a very, at 100 yards, that's a very accurate way because you're not going to have like crosswinds down there.
Exactly.
It really depends, like sometimes we have different wind formulas. Todd Hodnett has quick wind that people, might be familiar with, where they use the G1 of a bullet, right? So if my G1 profile, let's say I'm doing my 22, okay? So my 22 has a ballistic coefficient of 0.131. So that means it's a 1 mile an hour gun. So anytime I feel wind on my face, I automatically have to assume that I need to use quick wind. So it would be like at 100 for a 1 mile an hour wind, it would be 0.1.
Right.
200 would be 0.2. So if I think it's 4 mile an hour, it'd be, 0.4. Yeah. And when I actually type 4 mile an hour into the ballistic thing, it spits out 0.5. So it's pretty close.
Right.
Yeah. You could do that. That's realistically what I'm probably doing in my mind. But
yeah,
when it's like long range distances, you have to look down range and see if you can see anything moving too, scrub brush, dust getting kicked up, the, veg being blown over a certain direction. And at that point, it's just, years of just looking at it and be like, I think that's, like 7 miles an hour. Yeah. If there's mirage, that helps a lot too. But, you can get a pretty good wind call off a mirage, but sometimes it gets so thick that it becomes difficult as well for that.
Really? I've never done that. I'm not aware of that method. How do you use a mirage for a wind call?
So if you're looking down range in your optic, especially at further distances, even on like a hot summer day, right? You're just looking at blacktop, you can see heat rising off of it.
Sure.
So typically if you're looking at it and you see it kind of going straight up, like a boil, if you will.
Yeah.
You'll see that, it's going straight up and there's no wind. But if you feel a breeze and you're actually looking at it in an optic, you can see it flowing that way.
Yeah, okay. Like a current, in the water. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but the only problem is like, so I can see something moving right to left, but what is the value? Is that like a pure 3 o'clock, 3 to 9? Yeah. Or is that maybe closer to like a 4 o'clock or 4:30?
Yeah.
But I mean, those are all tools that, you combine all these things. I get a reading of my position with my Kestrel, 4 mile an hour, from the 4 o'clock. And then I look down range and I still see, right to left. I'm not totally sure of the value, but I'm going to make an educated guess, based on the terrain that I'm looking at too. Is it a flat field? So the wind's blowing the same. Is there a mountain blocking it from that side? Is there a big, thick tree line that might be blocking the wind?
Gotcha. Do depressions in the land or like little valleys, do they make a difference to the wind? Do you get
They do, yeah. I mean, so this is such a stereotypical thing to say, but when you look at it, you got to think about it as like if water was to flow across that, how would it flow? The wind's going to do the very similar thing when it hits those different types of micro terrain or, major terrain features. Sometimes it causes a swirl, weird stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you get like if you're looking at a river, you see little eddies and swirls and like little vortices and things. I guess the same thing happens with the wind.
Absolutely. It's just you just can't see it, which sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, you need some smoke or something flowing across. So let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? How did you get started? And how did you get to where you are now?
So I grew up in kind of rural Pennsylvania on the East Coast. I grew up on the western side of the state. There's a lot of farming, a lot of farm fields, corn mainly. So I grew up, shooting a pellet gun most of my younger years. I decided that college wasn't going to be for me. I decided to join the Marine Corps. I joined the Marine Corps as a 0311 basic infantry as a rifleman. I did 2 deployments to Iraq as an 11. After that, I became interested in the sniper platoon and decided to do the screener for it. So I went through a screener. It was about a week long.
Right.
The one I went through. And how it works in a sniper platoon is in a normal infantry battalion, you have one sniper platoon. And what they do is they run screeners for people who are interested in it. And once they come to the platoon, you learn everything that you would learn at school in the platoon. So it's a lot of on-the-job training. So you can have a mix of people who are school-trained snipers and non-school trained in the platoon. And those guys that have gone through the on-the-job training are just kind of waiting for their turn to go through school.
Right.
So, I went to the platoon, did a deployment to Afghanistan with them, came back, went through school. And from there, became a sniper, right? I was actually a school-trained sniper then.
Right.
After that, I did a stint as a combat instructor. And then after that, I was the sniper platoon sergeant for infantry battalion. And then from there, I became the staff NCOIC and mountain sniper.
Right. Which is what you do now.
Yeah, which is where I'm currently at right now.
So when you're a combat instructor, are you teaching, do you teach the green recruits how to be Marines? Is that level, or is it like an advanced course for people who are already or going on deployment, or you teach specific skills, or how does that work?
So it could be a mix of both, right? It's exactly what you described. You could go to ITB, like Infantry Training Battalion, and you'll be training 0311s that just came out of boot camp. Or you might end up at, Advanced Infantry Marine, where corporals and sergeants who are squad leaders come from the fleet and get their advanced infantry class. So it all depends. A lot of times what happens is guys will go to like ITB and they'll do, a year there, and then they'll kind of progress over to AITB, where they'll start teaching the advanced schools.
Right. Okay, cool. Okay. And then so those guys, once they've been recruits, can then decide, I quite like to be a sniper, and they go through the process you just described.
Yeah, they get to the fleet. I'm not sure how the Royal Marines are as far as what their fleet process is like, or how they go into a recce or sniper role. Yeah. But for us, it's, that 0311, he goes through boot camp, and he goes through infantry training battalion, and then he goes to the fleet. From there, he's like, hey, I want to be a sniper. And sniper platoon's running a screener, and he's like, I'd like to go to that. And he either makes the cut or he doesn't. Yeah,
for sure. I don't know for the Royal Marines. We haven't had one on yet, but we'll have to do that. We'll have to reach out and try and tempt one on. So that's cool. So you've been in the Marine Corps a while. You're still there, and you're also a competitive PRS shooter, which is that's your passion outside of the Marines, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it started off, just kind of going to the desert and shooting with my buddies. Unfortunately, in the Marine Corps, you don't always get the amount of shooting in that would be required to stay proficient at our job.
Really?
So I started reloading and just going out to the desert, with a few friends every now and then and shooting out there. And one of my buddies, Phil, he kind of got into competitive shooting and then invited me to go to a match down in Arizona, and I ended up going to that and kind of caught the bug, and it just progressed from there. And I started to realize that a lot of the things that I don't want to say that I've been taught in the Marine Corps wrong, or it was a different way of thinking about shooting.
Really?
Yeah, it definitely opened my eyes to different ways to approach things that I might encounter in a combat scenario versus what I would see like in the competitive shooting. And some things don't transfer over, like big gamer bags or whatnot, but you can easily change out that bag for, a day pack or my ruck.
Yeah.
So a lot of those same skills apply. It was just, realizing how to apply them and teach them to other Marines and explain to them that, this might be a big bag filled with foam, but this could easily be your day pack and you can use it in the same manner.
Yeah, for sure. Was there a lot of crossover? Because obviously, I mean, I'm not military myself, but I can imagine you're in a combat situation. You do not have a perfect bench rest to set up and take your shot. You're laying there. You might be in the dirt. You might be in an urban environment, and you have to set up as good a position as you can, right? Did that prepare you for the PRS style of shooting, where you got to take shots from different positions, or did you have to learn that whole thing again?
So, when people think of like snipers, they have this perception that this dude, at least before I became a sniper, I was like, these dudes must shoot all the time, that's all they do. And it turns out, I'd say probably 90% of the job is just watching stuff. How patient can I be?
Really?
I watch, and realistically, when we talk about Marine snipers, it's scout snipers. So you're a scout first.
Right.
And usually you're doing a lot of reporting. So there's so much more to the job than just shooting. And I think that that's where a lot of people kind of make this misconception that these dudes are like best shooters in the world. In an infantry battalion, they certainly are. And it's definitely a different type of shooting. However, a lot of the skills from PRS, such as taking a shot under duress and time, definitely apply to anything that you might encounter while deployed.
Yeah.
I think that the closest school that I went to competitive shooting would probably be urban. Urban sniper, you shoot off a lot of different types of barricades under time with some stress added. So, and it was definitely the most realistic scenario that I could create as far as, something that you might encounter while you're deployed.
Was that a military course, or was that a civilian course, the urban sniper?
It was definitely a military course.
Yeah, cool. And you said there are a couple of, we were speaking earlier, you said there are a couple of competitions that mimic that kind of style.
Yeah, so there's the Rifleman's Team Challenge, which is actually run by Chaz Bales. I went to that one last year. Yeah. And it's more of a field style shoot, a little less competition. I don't want to say competition, but PRSy, where you're on a lot of like man-made barricades, whereas Chaz's match, the Rifleman's Team Challenge, was more along the lines of, I get to a stage, I have to find the targets, range the targets, and I possibly be shooting off of something natural, like a rock formation or whatnot. And then there's their kind of next level upwards competition dynamics. And, you have like assault stages where one of you has an AR and your partner has a long gun, and your partner has to take care of near targets and you're dealing with far targets. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, Chaz was on the last episode. And gave us a little bit of an overview of the match that he's putting together. Actually, we'll touch on that a little bit later on because I want to ask you about something you're doing for that. But so you started competitive shooting. You started with PRS. Why did you choose PRS over something else like F-Class?
So F-Class, I really don't know that much about it. I didn't see the translation of skills and time spent on that. Whereas, PRS or NRL or any type of kind of tactical rifle shooting, I could easily justify, to myself as something that would be progressing my skills for my everyday job as well.
Yeah. The PRS as a competition, what distinguishes it from other types of shooting competition is you have a time limit. So it's like 120 seconds sometimes. Is that right? To take all your shots?
So depending on the match director and the stage that you go to, sometimes what they'll do is they will shrink the time, make the targets bigger.
Right.
So, like you feel really rushed and people make a lot of mistakes. They're like, oh, it's only 90 seconds on the clock and I have just as many targets. But, instead of being 2 MOA, it'll be 3 MOA. It really depends on what the match director feels like doing and the kind of space that they're working with. So let's say, it's a small range. It only goes out to 800 yards. They might do, bigger targets with a faster time limit or smaller targets, reduced size targets because they only have so much range to work with. So I've seen all of the above happen at different matches.
Okay. So there's a massive variety, really, between matches.
Well, it would be boring if you went to the same match every single time.
Right. For sure. Okay. So we've got our first, I think PRS started here a couple of years ago. I haven't been myself. I haven't shot in it, but it sounds like one of the more dynamic types of shooting sport. Because you're moving, you're shifting your firing position. I've watched videos of, is it your buddy Phil Vallejo?
Yeah, Phil, him doing his Instagram videos talking about, different types of training that people can do.
Yeah. So I've watched it, watched him do it off of the different, he's shooting out of a window and then there's a tank trap and he's shooting off of a tank trap and all this variety. It looks really cool. So how often do you compete in a PRS match? Do you go monthly or is it annually? How often do you do that?
I try to go to one once a month. I can't always do that with work schedule. At a minimum, at least go to the club match. And we have different levels of matches too. A lot of times people have a local match or a club match where it's only like $10 to shoot, and you just compete against other people for fun. And that's really where most people start before they decide to go to a national level match. They figure out what gear works for them, what they need to work on. Maybe that 30-06 hunting rifle wasn't the best idea for the competition shoot. I've definitely seen some interesting calibers show up at club matches. There's nothing wrong with that. People show up and just want to see how they do against other people and how their gear works. So it's definitely a good way to get started. And that's where most of the people I know started, is at club matches.
I mean, I guess it is, for somebody who's coming to it new, it's a whole new world, isn't it? It's new gear. It's a new style of shooting, like new skills you've got to learn. It must be a lot for somebody to come in and think, especially if they've just been hunting, and then they go to PRS. There's a big difference in the gear that you guys use. What would you recommend as a good starting setup for somebody who's coming into PRS?
I mean, I think you should start with whatever you have,
For real.
Yeah, let's say you have a 308, there's nothing wrong with practicing with that. The gun that I practice with the most is my 223 bolt gun.
Right.
Why? Because it's got great barrel life. It's cheap, you can get 1,000 rounds of 223 for a pretty good price. So it all depends, especially with who they're competing against too. If you're just going to a club match and you're competing against your buddies, maybe that hunting rifle will be all right.
Yeah.
But if you're definitely looking to get into like a PRS type club match, if they have the ability to go and watch a match for the first time, that's a great way to do it. I've seen a lot of new people show up to matches and they're there to watch, or they help RO a stage. They'll be let's say they go to a stage and there's a senior dude there, and then they'll have a new guy that's never shot before, and he's just helping keep score, but he gets to watch to see what the shooters are using, and he gets to see how it's run, so he has a pretty good grasp of what he needs, or they need, coming into the match, and the kind of mindset and the preparation that you need before each stage.
And I think I've seen your setup. So you've got like quite a heavy MDT chassis on one of your guns. Is that right? And then one of the things I notice is weight is not an issue in PRS, or it's like the opposite way around. You actually want a lot of weight on the rifle, don't you?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. You think about it, you're like, I'm going to be in a competition. I probably want like a light gun or something.
Yeah,
and then you get
that's what you
everybody's
think.
gun. Yeah, everybody's gun weighs like 24 pounds. Some people's guns do. It was funny because I actually I went shooting with a friend. Her name's Ray, and I let her borrow my gun, and she went to pick it up. She's like, "Oh my god, this thing's ridiculous!" And she's a shooter as well. She uses Manor stocks,
right?
But obviously, if I can have a gun and I put it on the barricade or in the prone or any kind of shooting, and I pull the trigger, and I can watch my own trace. I'm not even talking about the splash down range. I'm talking about the vapor trail that my bullet makes.
Right.
And if I can watch that go down range and see if I'm about to miss before that thing even hits the target, that's a huge advantage.
Really, really. And then so presumably you get that instant feedback and you can adjust. Are you allowed to attempt the shot again?
So it depends on the stage, right? Some stages, you have to shoot the target twice. So let's say I'm like, hey, I thought that was a 4-mile-an-hour wind call and it should have been a 6, and I shoot and I watch that vapor go just sail off the right edge. I'm like, I already know that, hey, I need to hold more off the left side or dial, depending on the type of shooting you're doing. And I make that correction and make that second round impact and move on, And so for the rest of my targets, I know what my wind call is supposed to be. It's huge, it saved me time, and I at least got a correct wind call. So having that heavy rifle helps a lot with recoil absorption and being able to spot your own rounds. That's
interesting. Yeah, getting that wind call off the vapor trail, that's not something that immediately came to my mind. So that's I can see how that is very handy, making the wind call.
You know, that's huge too. That's not just like a competitive shooting thing. That's any type of shooting application, right? So like whether
Yeah,
I'm deployed as a Marine sniper
yeah,
or yeah, just shooting steel, right? You know, I know that hey, I had good fundamentals behind the gun. It recoiled. I still had a sight picture of the target. And
yeah,
you know, let's say I'm shooting a lighter gun and I'm not going to catch that trace, but at least I'll catch splash. You know, I
yeah,
saw it miss off the right side. I saw it hit into the dirt. Okay, I saw that. I can make a correction now.
yeah, yeah. And how? So this raises like another question, which is how do you train for this type of thing? How do you? Because it's specific. There must be specific training to PRS. You must have to train under duress or under like a time limit or at different ranges. You know, in sequence. How do you personally train for matches?
Um, I actually talked with Phil about this, and we talked a lot about isolating training, right?
Right.
So, you know, let's say I go to a match and I don't do that well on a certain stage. Oh, I write that down in my match book, and when I get home, I'm like, well, time to recreate that stage as best as I can. And so
Right.
from there, a lot of times, you know, maybe it was a position that I wasn't good at. It was like high kneeling or something on a certain type of barricade. Well, I'll go home and I will set up that type of barricade. I'll put 10 seconds on the shot timer and I'll give myself 10 seconds to build my position and take a shot. So I'll take that shot, whether I hit or miss. I will do that over and over again. And usually I do it about 10 times and then I take a break. So it's
Right.
just muscle memory of me building that same position over and over again and taking that shot. And
Gotcha.
it just kind of isolates that specific task that I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Um, so you know you don't need to shoot the whole course of fire to become a good shooter at it.
Yeah.
Once I start to isolate, well, maybe I'm pretty good in the low kneeling. I don't really need to work on that as much, but that high kneeling, you know, and then I
Yeah.
go to the next match and all of a sudden my high kneeling, you know, I'm making those shots. It's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen as well again from your mate Phil's videos. He's very honest and posts his blooper reel, which I thought was brilliant. There, I can see how things can easily go wrong when the pressure is on and the time is on, like the magazine's dropping out or the bag falls off the barricade. Do you? I
I've
thought it
seen
was,
some people just fall apart. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, and I'm talking even, you know, while we're teaching our mountain sniper course too, you know, it happens to professional snipers, you know, they'll be shooting off of our rooftop that we have set up on top of Rocket Mountain, and all of a sudden their bag falls off the front of it and that thing just goes rolling down the mountain. You can just kind of see the look of defeat in their face, you know. This is
you're never getting it back.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's like, oh, it's gone for the day. But you know that realistically has consequences too.
for sure.
You know, during a match, it's funny, but
Yeah,
you know, in real life, that might be, you know, that dude now no longer has that capability or that the ability
yeah,
to take that shot because he lost a piece of gear. So you know, at one side, it's like, yeah, it makes you laugh, but on the other hand, it's a very valuable life lesson as far as, you know, making sure all of your gear is within one arm's reach and that you have positive control of it. And at a lot
yeah.
of matches, if you leave something behind, like a tripod or a magazine, they won't count hits until you have that piece of gear back within one arm's
Is that
reach.
right?
Yeah.
Really?
Because what people will do sometimes is like go up to a stage and they'll use the tripod for the first part of it, but then they don't need it for the rest of the shots. So they'll leave the tripod so they don't have to drag it around.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, that seems obvious, but they don't like that. They want you to bring it with you if you took it in the first place.
Yes. So if you take it, you're taking it with you for the whole
You
round.
own it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. With regard to like dropping the bag and having positive control of all your gear, is it is it sensible to start like tagging stuff to the rifle, like by carabiner or something? Like hooking it on, or is that just not allowed, or is that just dumb?
Well, it all depends. So I mean, like some of the gear we start to see now is, you know, a bag that attaches to my Arca rail. So as I
Yes.
transition from barricade to barricade, you know, I'm not messing with the bag and it can't fall. And now my rifle is heavier. So,
Yes.
you know, a lot of benefits to that. In a military application, it's, you know, I might have to transition a lot where I need that bag in the rear now. I need it up front. So maybe
Yeah.
it's better to have a bag that just straps over the top of the barrel. and I can disconnect that and move it around as necessary. But no, it's not dumb at all. I mean, when you go through sniper school, we have things called target indicators, right? And there's a big, long definition of it, but basically it boils down to, anything that you leave behind, the enemy can identify you from.
Sure.
So, like if you leave the firing line and they find a boot van, everybody pays for it, right? Because they're like, oh, there was people here. So, if you're, it's definitely, you definitely want to keep everything on you nice and tight. I learned a lot of hard lessons going through different sniper schools as far as, things being left behind. Because that might be something that was mission critical too, right? Or the enemy knows you're in the area. But for, PRS shooting, it's if you leave something behind, all of a sudden now you're missing targets, even though you hit because your magazine is, 6 feet away, or you left a bag back there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess you just develop a sort of a personal discipline around your gear and keep your mind on it. And I could definitely see how when the clock starts ticking, all that stuff goes out the window, though. That's the interesting thing about PRS for me, is the timer.
Well, what happens is people don't go into it with like a game plan, right? They're just like, they hear that beep and then that's it. It's like, oh, I'm doing it live, instead of kind of thinking about it. So you're watching the other people in front of you go before you, right? Unless you're the first person on that stage, and that it rotates. So like if you're the first person, now you're the second person. Until all the way till you go to the end, and then you're the first person again. So you do get a lot of time to watch other people go through the stage, and you're like, wow, that was not good. I'm not going to do what he just did. Or you'll see like 3 or 4 people do really well using a tripod as rear support, or using just a bat. So you have a good idea in your mind what you want to do. You're like, ooh, that looked good, but I might just want to change this little thing because I think that'll work better for me, or a little faster. But that's where you really see people mess up. I've seen people leave dope on from a previous stage, so they'll have like 6 mils still on the gun, and the target's at only like 300 yards, and that thing's just sailing over the target, and they have no idea.
And they don't even notice.
They're like, they're getting frustrated because they just missed that. Oh, they noticed that they missed, but they don't know why. They're like, it was a great shot. What happened? And they look at their turrets, and it's 6 mils up, and you can kind of see the look on their face, like, that's stupid. So.
And now you're under pressure. You've got to readjust before the time runs out. Oh, that's crazy. It actually sounds terrifying. I've got to be honest.
I mean, I went to my first one, and I'm like, I'm a Marine sniper. I'm going to do pretty well, and tank, and just stupid stuff like that, like leaving your dope on your gun, shooting in yards versus meters, because in the military we shoot in meters, but all the competitors are shooting in yards. So I think my first match, my Kestrel was still in meters, and I'm like, I don't know why I'm hitting high on everything.
Something as simple as that.
Oh yeah, and it's just something that people overlook.
That's easily done. There's so many settings that is easily done. So do you have a checklist now before you get up to the stage and before you even arrive at the thing? Do you check in your turrets, you check in your Kestrel and all that sort of stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing I do, I get to a new stage, I listen to the stage brief, and a lot of times you'll have your matchbook, but sometimes they'll be like, hey, target 4 broke. So, we're using this target now. Here's the new distance. So I have a little armband that I write all of my targets down on in the order that they're supposed to be shot and the amount of times they're supposed to be shot. So it's just literally just like a little quarterback, is what we call football, armband. So you can write on there with a grease pen, target 1 400 yards, and my dope is, 1.4. And the wind call for a 4 mile an hour. And I need to shoot that 2 times. And, I just put down the order of my targets.
And then you can kind of rehearse that in your head before you even step up.
Oh, absolutely. And then I'll get on my whatever I'm using, if I'm using binoculars or if I'm using my spotting scope, and I'll look at each target and memorize where it's at. And usually what I try to do is I try to find some type of landmark or big visual object that I can easily just identify naked eye. So let's say target 1 is at 400 yards, but it's got this giant bush next to it. I'm like, okay, bush. I know I can, boom, go right to the bush, and then search for the target. Because you see people, they'll get lost in the scope. They'll be all the way at like 21 power magnification, and they're looking down range, and they're just eating time, and they can't find this target. So low power, find a big landmark. Whether it be a road intersection, a big bush, a group of trees that sticks out to you, a burn barrel that's down there. There's always something down there that's next to this target that you can use to help you identify. Yeah,
that makes sense. So big picture, and then zoom in on the target. I guess that's just about like rapid target acquisition, because you got to go from that first one to the next one to the next one and the next one, and just keep it smooth. That's the sense that I get from it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you start to do that, and you kind of start off dialing. I know I did, just because of the background of, in the Marine Corps, it's like always dial your dopes. Even though I'm transitioning targets. Well, now it's starting to get to the point where, that's eating up some time. And the reticles in our scopes have progressed to the point where, I don't even need to dial anymore.
Sure.
Right. So if I'm at, 1.2, 2.5, I mean, I'm literally just using the reticle in there, and I'm using holdovers, and I'm transitioning between targets without ever dialing.
If you know what you're doing, it sounds quicker.
Yeah, but I've also seen people bomb it, and I've definitely a few times where, I forgot that I didn't dial it, and I just put it on that center reticle and send it. And it's like 3 mils low, and I'm like, that was stupid.
Yeah. Easily done. So you said there's obviously some good crossover, like what you learn in PRS helps you in what you do in your job, in the military.
I think that. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's all right. That's kind of what I was going to ask. Like, what are those things? Like, what has helped you?
The biggest things that I've taken away from it are time management.
Okay.
How fast can I build this position? How steady can I be? And then how quickly can I engage targets from my field of view with where I'm at, with the gear that I have?
Yeah.
And that was absolutely huge. And definitely wind, right? The more I shoot, like every round I send down range is more and more training, right? So, you're constantly improving your wind reading abilities, your fundamentals.
Yeah.
I think that was the biggest takeaway, was just time management, right? So, if I'm supporting some type of maneuver element and I'm running up to a rooftop to support them, and I need to build this position quickly and start identifying and engaging targets, that skill set transitions very quickly.
Yeah.
That's, I think, where the big crossover is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's speeding up the whole process, making it smoother.
And being comfortable in that timeline.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a crossover across a lot of sports. You see the pros in any sport make it look easy because they're smooth and they're calm and they've got it all under control, and it looks so easy. And then you try and do it, or I try and do it. I know for a fact.
You look like an abortion. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's terrible, and I'm sweating, and then something, I knock the thing over, or I break something, or because you panic.
Yeah, I mean, you start making stupid mistakes.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the difference between, an amateur or a professional.
Yeah.
And that's something we talk to our students about too. Just because our round allocation, let's say as a platoon they get 2,000 rounds every quarter, right?
Yeah.
So 2,000 rounds divided by, let's say, 10 shooters.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of ammo.
No.
And they're like, well, yeah, it's enough. We go out and shoot. I'm like, all right. So I'm like, last year I put 1,800 rounds on my 223 barrel.
Right.
Do you guys think that's a lot? I'm like, that's almost the same amount that you get in a quarter that I shot by myself on my 223. And they're like, yeah, that sounds like a lot. I'm like, that means that I practiced 18 times.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a lot. Yeah.
No, and if a professional athlete was like, hey, I practiced 18 times this year, you'd be like, you're a joke,
I'm ready for the Olympics.
Yeah, right. So when you think about it and you put it into perspective, it's like the amount of ammo that some of these guys are shooting professionally. Like, I know a guy that shoots about 400 rounds a week.
Wow. Okay.
And he's also winning a lot too.
Yes, that's weird. That's a strange correlation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds pretty physical as well, PRS. Do you have to be fairly fit to be good at PRS?
No.
Fair enough.
You definitely don't, because I've definitely gotten humbled by some people that are probably not the most physically fit, but
Okay.
they can shoot really, really well. If you start looking at like the competition dynamics ones where you are hiking to each stage, where there's like a mile, 2 miles in between each stage,
Yeah.
or like the Mammoth Sniper Challenge where the round count isn't necessarily as high. We're in like the 60 to 100 kind of area round count, but there's a lot of movement, and your movement speed counts towards your overall score. Then those types of competitions, it's sort of like your physical fitness definitely comes into play.
Right. What sort of gear is essential for PRS? Because I've seen you guys using really interesting, all sorts of different rests. Chaz makes 3 or 4 different bags, all of which he's used in PRS for different things. You've got different requirements from the scope mount, like we were talking about earlier, and we'll touch on that as well probably a bit later. But what is essential if someone's getting into PRS? What do they need to bring with them? And do they need to be comfortable with that gear before they show up?
I mean, it's such a broad question, right?
For real.
You don't know what you don't know until you figure that out real quick on the line.
Yeah.
So I think that what most people need going into it is, a rifle that they have a good zero with.
Yeah.
And but most of all is just a good attitude. You're gonna get humbled when you go to your first match, and that's where you're really gonna learn what you need as a shooter. Because I might really like a certain bag, and then Chaz, he's like, well, I hate that bag. I don't use it, and I'm like, this is my favorite bag. And I've gone back and forth with Chaz about things I want in a bag and things that he thinks should be in a bag. So, and I mean, that's definitely a relationship between me and him where we talk about, what do we think that most people would want in a bag? So, I can't say specifically what somebody should go out and buy right off the bat. I think that's the beauty of also going to the like a club match is people have that gear there, and you're like, oh, hey, can I try that bag? And you're like, wow, this really worked for me. Or, I didn't really like the way that felt or how it handled. Okay. So, you definitely need a rifle with a scope that has adjustments, and get some practice with it. There's plenty of information online, just looking up, PRS and seeing what they're doing, and then go to a club match. And I know that that's in the UK. I'm not super familiar with your laws, but I mean, if you go to a match and see what people are doing there, especially, I know that they have a PRS match going in Scotland, right?
Yep.
So definitely that. And then me and you talked about, the 22 matches that are kind of becoming pretty popular in the US, mainly because it's very cheap and you don't need that much space to shoot it. Kids can do it, and it's more of like a fun thing. Yeah, you can still win the NRL 22, but a lot of people are interested in that just because it's not as, I don't want to say intimidating, but it's definitely easier to get into.
Yeah, definitely. Cheaper as well. Definitely
significantly. Cheaper. Well, it depends, Some people drop, as much into their 22 as they would their competition rifle.
Yeah, true. Some people go nuts, for their air rifles as well, I guess you could do an air rifle PRS here in the UK. Like, I hadn't thought of that, but
so they do. That's actually part of the NRL 22. Is they have an air gun class.
Right.
I'm not familiar with it though. So
no. Well, if you can play with the big toys, why would you play with the air rifles?
Well, I mean, I have lots of guns, right? But I go shoot my 22 all the time. It's great practice.
Yes.
I don't feel bad about shooting 500 rounds of it. It only cost me like $20. And that barrel's going to last forever. But, I still get great wind calls from it. All the fundamentals are the same. There's no recoil, which is nice for training. So you don't like build bad habits,
Yeah. When we were talking earlier as well, just to go back to the training, you said there was a good technique for people to learn to shoot better in PRS and under pressure would be to time themselves per shot, like 10 seconds per shot. Can you explain that again?
Yeah. What I like to do for a lot of different barricade or even paper drills at 100, just if I want to check to see if my fundamentals are starting to slip, it happens. You start to slap the trigger or whatnot. Let's say at 100 yards, I'll put up a paper target and it's got 5 zeroing diamonds, just 1-inch diamonds that I can pick a point on them, and hey, that's my target. So, I'll be standing behind the gun's in the prone down there. I'll set the shot timer for 10 seconds, put on a 5-second delay so I can stand up and put my shot timer on my pocket, and it goes off and I drop down to the prone and I have 10 seconds to take a shot. So, I have to build my perfect prone position in 10 seconds and take that shot. And then after that too, even after I take the shot, even though I know I'm only taking one shot, I still keep that trigger pinned to the rear and I observe the target. Where did that hit? Did I jerk that? When I call the shot mentally, I'm like, hey, that broke, 12 o'clock inside the diamond. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And when I look down range, like, hey, it's a little high in the diamond, but I still kept it in there. I'm like, all right, cool. I knew that I called that. I pulled it a little bit. And that's huge for shooters, to be honest with themselves. Was that a bad shot or was it a wind call? Did you jerk it off the target down range? Yeah. And shooting at paper really helps you kind of develop, it doesn't lie. It tells you messed that up. There's no wind to blame. That was all you. So I do that over and over again, just 10 seconds, and then I'll put a barricade up and I'll shoot the barricade at 100 yards at paper, and I'll practice like that, building my barricade position. And I mean, you really see how nasty you kind of shoot.
Yeah.
Barricade, shooting steel is one thing, but the paper can really tell you a lot about you as a shooter. It doesn't lie.
Yeah, for sure. Does it help to have a buddy, have your mate there watching and being quite strict as well with you? Like, because it's easy to lie to yourself, isn't it?
Yes and no, right? So some days, like, I just don't want to be bothered by it. And I just go out there and I shoot myself. But when I want to actually like practice and train, it's great to have a buddy there. Because one, they're watching you and they're talking shit to you, obviously, telling you that you suck as a shooter. Because I'm obviously shooting with other Marine snipers, so
you can't give each other shit. It's the law.
Yeah, exactly. No, it is nice to have that, especially when you move away from the paper. You're like, hey, I know my fundamentals are good. I've been doing paper drills, a couple times now. I have a great zero. I'd like to see how I do at distance. And when you're shooting at distance, I have steel targets, so it's easy, to tell if I hit or not. But for some people, whatever they're shooting at might not be as easy to tell, if they have an impact or not, or even where they impacted on the target. So a lot of times I'm shooting with my buddies, and we're shooting steel, and it's on a gong. And sometimes, they're just, I don't want to say they're newer shooters, but they're Marine snipers. So it's like if it's a hit to them, and they move on. But like where you hit on that steel is a big deal to me now. So it's like, I hit that target. That was a man-sized target, in the Marine Corps. And he went down. Now I'm moving on. But in PRS or competition, it's like, ooh, I saw that hit right edge. Maybe that wind call wasn't quite bold enough, so my next target, I know I need to make that wind call bold. So if, I hit that gong and it twists to the right, like real hard, I'm like, oof, that wind call was a little weak, especially if that's the same target, like it's a stage where you have to shoot the same target over and over again, but just change positions. Yeah. Next time you're like, maybe instead of left edge, you're holding 0.2 off the left side, so it really matters where you're hitting on there as well. So having a buddy, to be able to watch that and like, hey, did you catch that? Yeah, I saw it hit right edge. Okay. And that's just you being, double check from your buddy, like make sure you're keeping your fundamentals good, especially on something like a barricade or a tripod where it's real easy to let those fundamentals slip.
Yeah, because it's like it's a little handicap, right? It's like makes everything easier for you. So going back to you were saying about you're doing like the two types of training you're doing are like isolation training. So you've done a match and you know that there's something that you didn't do great at. You go and practice that and you get the muscle memory right. And then the other thing is you're doing short range paper drills under time or under duress, or where you have like you start with a standing position, hands over your head, and you get down and you set up a good prone position, you take the shot. That sounds like you're building muscle memory as well. So is muscle memory like crucial to good performance in PRS matches?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be, even though, let's say, I come up to a barricade and it's a pallet, right?
Yeah.
um, what I use most of the time is a pallet that I've modified and I slide it over to T-posts or E-stakes, and that's my barricade, right?
Okay.
But I go to a match and it's a concrete wall with a hole in it, but it's roughly 4 feet high. Well, is that hole really any different than the barricade I shot at off of
Sure.
when I was practicing?
Sure.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So having that muscle memory, I'm like, I know how to do that. That's a high kneeling. This is what I need. I need this bag and I need my tripod as rear support. Or if it's a limited gear stage where I can only use one bag, I'm like, well, this is the bag I'm going to use for that. It works the best for this type of shooting.
Okay. So there are stages where they say you can only bring certain gear.
Yeah, and a lot of match directors are starting to really restrict the types of gear that people are using, because if I go up to a certain stage and I just use a tripod on every stage, is that really challenging anybody?
Sure.
If everybody cleans that stage, it's like, well, obviously the stage is really easy and it's not challenging anybody. And it's kind of defeating the purpose of like the sportsmanship of it, I guess.
Yeah, the versatility. How many stages are there normally in a competition then?
It depends if it's like a 1 day match or a 2 day match, but typically like 10 stages a day.
Okay. So do you still need to, I guess you've answered this before because you said every stage is different, but do you need things like the ballistic apps? Do you need the kestrels? Do you need all that variety of gear to do this? Or is it not really, or is it different every match?
It depends on the level that you want to compete at.
Okay.
So if I go to a match and I came from, let's say I live in Scotland, right? And I have plenty of distance to shoot. So I can shoot from 100 meters to 1,000 meters. And I have all of my distances in 25 meters, and I have that on a little armband. Do I need a kestrel for the match that I'm going to? Probably not, especially if it's, in Scotland at a similar elevation with similar atmospherics. You'll be fine. But, let's say, I live in Northern California and I'm at 7,000 feet elevation and I zero my gun up here and I practice up here. Well, now I go to a match in Phoenix and it's at like 200 feet elevation.
Right.
I have a huge atmospheric change and my kestrel automatically updates that for me. So my kestrel detects that and it's like, hey, this is your new dopes. And, as a military shooter too, that's the way we rely on it. Yeah, we have hard data. This is what my gun does at this atmospherics, but let's say, I deployed to Afghanistan, that's completely different atmospherics, and my kestrel automatically updates that for me. So depending on the level of shooting that you're doing, if you're going to a club match, you'd probably be fine. But with the availability of free ballistic apps on it, like everybody has a cell phone in their pocket, there's no reason that you can't download a ballistic app like Straylock or Applied Ballistics or Hornadays, a free app, Fort Off. Those are free. You can download those, and they're going to give you a good ballistic equation for that firing solution. Why would you not use it?
Yeah, of course. I guess it's just if you're trying to be a purist or if you're a masochist or you like maths.
Well, I mean, even hunters. I mean, we see hunters in the U.S. now that's prolific. I have this kestrel. If I'm going on a $5,000 hunt, why would I not take a kestrel?
Right.
You
don't want to come away empty-handed.
Yeah, exactly. So they have their good 100-meter or 100-yard zero. Their kestrel set up perfectly. They lays that bighorn sheep at 600 yards. That kestrel spits out that correct firing solution. That's a trophy hunt right there.
Yeah, it seems too easy. But if I'd paid $5,000, I'd want to hit the bastard as well.
I mean, what's $700 for a kestrel if you're paying $5,000 for the hunt?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, that also applies for varminting too. People dealing with varmints that are only at 100 yards. It's still that 22. My 22, I need 1.5 mils of elevation to hit something at 100 yards.
Yeah. It seems like you've got to get familiar with so many different functions of shooting to really start to excel at PRS, and it's got to become natural. That's the feeling I'm getting from this discussion. Is it takes time to grease the wheels or whatever. So that when you step up to that stage and the clock starts, you're comfortable with the gear you have. You're comfortable in different shooting positions. You don't have to double think it because you're under pressure now, and you're gonna balls it out.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the only thing that I should be thinking about is, do I have the right dope on my gun? What's the wind doing? And where's the target at?
Right. Dope, wind, target. Making notes. Chaz, I should say who Chaz is. Chaz is the owner of Warhorse Development. He's on the previous episode, and he did invite us to come and shoot the match. And I thought, yeah, one, I'm not sure I can get over there anyway because of this damn virus. But oh my god, putting myself on the line in front of all you guys, not a chance.
You know, a lot of matches, they have train ups too. You know, so they're trying to encourage new shooters to enjoy the match. So a lot of matches are starting to do like a 1 day train up beforehand, where some of the more seasoned shooters are available there, and they run you through a few simple drills and kind of like mindset and preparation for different stages that you might encounter, and just different ways of thinking about shooting off of stuff and making sure they have a good zero and that they understand why they have that kestrel and how to use it and how to kind of apply it to different scenarios. And that's really starting to help people a lot. It kind of removes that intimidation too. It's like, well, I just got like a train up too. So, hey, this is my first match. I at least came to the train up. I'm willing to learn. I just have to have an open mind.
Yeah, it's a good point actually, because you're running the train up, aren't you? At Chaz's match. Yeah. So what are you going to cover in that day? Is it a day's course?
Yeah, it's a day's course, and you try to limit it to be like right around 100 rounds because people already have to bring 200 to 250 rounds for the match. Yep. So it gets expensive, and a lot of people barrel life is a big deal. But what we're going to cover, just at the beginning is kind of obviously range safety, but after that, some natural point of aim, making sure that everybody has a good zero, and then probably get into some paper drills at 100 off the prone. After that, we'll move into barricade drills at 100, and then tripod drills. After that, we'll finally push out to distance on steel, prone, barricade, and tripod, and then talk about target acquisition and kind of how to break up the range and find those targets. And I mean, that's pretty much a day right there. Yeah.
That's I can imagine that would take up a lot of time. How many people were attending the train up in this case?
He limited it to 16, and it filled up within, I think, the first day.
Wow, really?
It being open, yeah. So I mean, we would open it to more people, but I can only help so many people at one time, and I have two other people helping me. They're great dudes, Nick Bazzone and Josh Reeves. I've known Josh Reeves for a minute now.
So PRS has been around. We obviously, I'm conscious we're using your time now. You've got stuff to do, so we'll just cover a couple more quick things. PRS has been around a couple of years, but it's reasonably new. It's growing. What developments are happening in PRS in terms of the gear or where the sport is going? Can you see it continuing to grow, for example? Is it changing at all?
From what I've seen the the NRL 22 is starting to explode a lot. Kind of like an offshoot of it, just because a lot more people can get into it. It's cheaper. It's easy for them to get into. It's not as kind of cost intensive, I guess. I know that a lot of people are talking about maybe doing different divisions inside of PRS or NRL, talking about maybe weight classes for rifles, some kind of restrictions on weight. None of that's official. I haven't seen it yet at a match. I know that it's been talked about, and there's always going to be growth in any sport. It's just waiting to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, it's an ever-shifting landscape, I guess. So what's a reasonable budget? This will be the last question, and I'll ask you what your ways to live by, and we can wrap it up. And I know you've got to get on with your day. So if somebody is coming into PRS for the first time, and most people in the UK will be doing that, what should they budget for a decent setup, for a reasonable setup?
I mean, that depends on the person, you know. Is he a doctor or is he a farmer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I also don't know what rifles you guys have available to you over there. You
A lot of
know,
hunting rifles. We get the Ruger Precision as like a
I mean, the Ruger Precision, you can't go wrong with that if that's available to you guys, you know.
yeah,
But whatever weapon or, you know, rifle, sporting rifle, if you will,
sure.
they decide to choose, just practice with it. You know, what people tend to do is they'll dump all this money into high-end gear instead of just practicing with what they have.
Yeah.
You know, who's really good? A guy who shoots 50 rounds with his $5,000 setup, or a guy who shoots 500 rounds with his, you know, $300 setup.
Yeah. Do you know, it's a really interesting thing. Out of 3 interviews, that's been the answer all 3 times. It comes down to how much you practice rather than, you know, how expensive your rifle is. So that's cool. So to close it out then, well, I'm asking everybody this. What do you have, like, words to live by, we call it, but it's like an ethos or like a spirit of, you know, how you go about life, and it's just taking it away from the technical and getting profound for 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, we pretty much hit it right there with what I talked about. You know, I'd rather see somebody train with what they have and become a master of that than go out and spend a ton of money on, you know, a new scope, a new chassis. So train with what you have, become good at it. You know, and that's really what's going to make you successful if this is something that you are interested in becoming a shooter at. You know, there's so many training tools out there that are free that people have access to nowadays with the internet, and they just don't take advantage of it when, you know, they're like, well, I just need more expensive stuff. You know, you can only buy so much skill before you really have to start training. At the end of the day, you have to master what you have. And if you don't, then you're not going to be successful.
For sure. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, well, that's great. I think a lot of people will gain a lot from that, Nick. That's awesome, man. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and expertise. That was really cool. Where can people find you, if you want them to find you, on the internet? If you don't, we'll just cut it.
No, that's fine. People can find me on Instagram. My name's Nick Bazzone on there, and if they have questions, you know, they can ask.
You've been listening to the Tier 1 Podcast, brought to you by Tier 1, makers of the world's finest rifle accessories. Find out more at tier-1-usa.com. And tune in for more great insights on the next episode.